Chapter 1. The Ember Beneath Ash. The loaf was still warm when she pressed it to her chest, stolen fresh from the baker's cart and wrapped in dockfish slick with salt and newspaper ink. Ilara paused at the door, counting her breath, 3 in, 3 out, the way her mother had taught her before the fever took her. Jonas coughed from the bed. The sound had worsened through the long winter, wet and rattling, his thin frame shaking beneath a quilt that had been their mother's. "Mouse?" His voice cracked on the word. "Here." She crossed the room in 3 steps, set the food on the chipped table, and touched his forehead. Still warm, still fighting. She allowed herself 1 heartbeat of relief before the sound came. Something heavy striking snow outside the frost-filmed window. She froze. The shape that staggered into the thin light spilling from her window wore dark lamellar armor, the kind forged for border wars. He lurched once, twice, then collapsed against the alley wall, leaving a smear of something dark and glittering against the ice. Amber. Not blood. Ichor. Ilara's hand found the knife she kept strapped to her thigh. Alphas meant danger. Alphas meant trouble. Alphas meant the kind of attention that got you sold to the maw, or worse. But something pulled at her, a thread she couldn't name. Kinship, maybe, or the simple mathematics of a dying man on her threshold. She watched him fail to rise, watched his hand claw at the frozen ground, and made the choice before her survival instinct could argue further. She tore strips from her own shawl, retrieved her mother's herb kit from beneath the bed, lavender, yarrow, the dried winterberry that stopped bleeding. The door groaned as she dragged him inside, his weight heavier than it should have been, his armor cold against her palms. His eyes fluttered as she laid him by the dying hearth. Amber bright, fevered, unfocused. She cleaned the blood from his face with snow-melted water. Her hands steady from years of tending Jonas through his own fevers, and the features that emerged made her breath catch. She had seen that face on copper coins pressed into the hands of statues, on broadsheets tacked to the maw's walls. The winter wolf. The king. Her knife hovered above his throat. She could sell him, a king worth something to the right lord, and the blood debt would vanish. Jonas would be free. His eyes found hers, clouded, desperate, searching, and something in them broke through the calculation. Not the king, just a dying being who had crawled to her door. Ilara set down the knife and reached for the yarrow. The night stretched long, measured in the drip of water against cracked lips and the ragged rhythm of fever breath. Ilara worked by touch and memory, her mother's voice in her ear. Yarrow for the wound, moonflower for the burn, winterberry to close what wants to bleed out. The paste smelled of crushed petals and old magic, the kind the seers pretended didn't exist. She smeared it across the gash along his ribs, where the lamellar had bitten deep, and bound it with moss pressed flat against her palm. Jonas watched from the bed, his quilt pulled to his chin. Storm-gray eyes tracked every movement, every flinching breath the stranger took. "Go to sleep, Joe." She didn't look up. "It's nothing. That man's bleeding through your bandages. Which is why I need quiet to fix it." He coughed, wet and rattling, but his gaze didn't waver. "That's the king." The words landed like a stone in still water. Ilara's hands stilled. "I don't know who you're talking about." She resumed her work, pressing fresh moss to the wound. "He's a stranger who crawled to my door, that's all." "The coins, the ones on the shrine in the maw. Go to sleep, Jonas." He was quiet for a long moment. Then the quilt rustled, and his breathing slowed into the uneven rhythm of genuine sleep. She let herself look at him then. Her brother, all sharp angles and stubborn courage. The only living thread connecting her to a world that didn't want them in it. The stranger's hand twitched. She caught it before it could fall, guided it back to the pallet, and felt the heat radiating from his skin. Fever climbing. She dipped cloth in snowmelt and draped it across his forehead, watching the water trace the hard line of his jaw. Near dawn, the wind finally quieted. The hearthstone had gone cold, and she could see her breath in the thin light seeping through the frost. His eyes opened. Amber. Clear now. Watching her with an intensity that made her want to step back, to disappear into the shadows where she belonged. But she didn't move. You're awake. Practical. Guarded. The wound's clean. You'll live. He studied her face like a map he was trying to read. She knew what he saw: hollow cheeks, the sharp architecture of survival, the wariness carved by years of watching her back. Nothing like the polished faces in his court. The blood debt. Her voice was flat, rehearsed. Lord Vale says my father left a levy unpaid. Corin Wynn, huntsman. Dead 7 winters now. She pulled at a thread in her sleeve. The amount's grown with interest. I'll work it off in his kitchens until I die, or until Jonas is old enough to be taken in my place. His hand lifted, slow, deliberate, and reached toward her. Stopped in the space between them, calloused, scarred. A king's hand, she realized, but shaped by the same work that shaped hers. She didn't flinch. The moment stretched, held, became something she couldn't name. Recognition, maybe. The gravity of 2 people who understood what it meant to carry the weight of a crown or a debt. A sound from the bed. Jonas stirring, his eyes snapping open, his gaze landing on the stranger with a jolt of alarm. Ilara moved before thought could catch up. She positioned herself between them, shoulder squared, blade of her posture sharp enough to cut. The stranger's eyes found hers one final time. Something shifted in their amber depths. Something she couldn't read. You risked yourself for nothing. His voice was rough, scraped raw by fever. That choice. He paused, the weight of it settling between them. I will remember it. The morning light cut blue and harsh across Frostbite Alley, turning frost to glass and poverty to something almost beautiful. Almost. Ilara heard them before she saw them. The heavy tread of wolf sigil cuirasses, the jangle of chainmail, the barked orders that sent rats scattering deeper into their holes. She moved to the window, barely breathing, and watched Captain Rian Holt lead his squad through the tenement blocks. His green-gray eyes swept each door, each shadow, searching, hunting. The neighbors knew the drill. Doors closed with the soft click of practiced silence. Curtains fell. The slum's economy of silence activated. Nobody saw anything. Nobody knew anyone. Nobody opened their mouth unless they wanted a one-way ticket to the Iron Maw. Ilara's blood turned to ice. She knew those boots. They brought arrest, beatings, and the removal of people who never came back. The sound was older than her father, older than her mother, older than the winter itself. Behind her, Kale rose from the pallet, weak but resolute. His hand found the door latch. I'll not endanger you further. She grabbed his wrist. Their eyes met, hers gray as storm clouds, his amber as banked fire. The air between them crackled with something she didn't have time to name. Stay quiet. Her voice barely above a breath. Trust me. She opened the door. Captain Holt stood on her threshold, boots planted in the mud, eyes the color of lichen on old stone. He looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe? Or just the dull awareness that she was nobody. Nothing. A flicker of movement in a world that preferred stillness. Evening, Captain. She kept her voice flat, Biao Yan perfected since childhood. Heard some noise. Came to look? He studied her, studied the room behind her. The meager hearth, the thin quilt, the boy coughing on the bed. Open the door wider. Nothing to see, Captain. Just me and my brother. Sickness, not company. Open it. She obeyed, revealing nothing, hiding everything. The room held its breath. Jonas emerged from behind the ragged curtain, coughing deliberately, visibly feverish. He leaned against the wall, a portrait of fragility. Just my cousin, Ilara said, the lie smooth as riverstone. Came down with the winter sickness. No food to spare, barely a breath to draw. You can see for yourself. Nothing here worth taking. Holt's jaw tightened. His eyes moved past her, probing the shadows, searching for something he couldn't name. Something in him warred with his orders. She saw it, the flicker, the hesitation, the buried thing that hadn't quite died. Move on, he said to his squad, voice yang. Nothing here. The guards filed past. Boots squelched in mud. Orders echoed down the alley, fading. The door closed. Ilara exhaled against the wood, her spine sliding down its surface until she sat on the cold floor, knees drawn up, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The stranger stood. Ilara watched the transformation happen in stages, the way he gathered himself, the way the weakness sloughed off like dead skin. When he turned to face her, something in his bearing had shifted. The wounded man was gone. In his place stood the winter wolf. You saved the king, he said. His voice carried the weight of crown and blade. Do you understand what that means? She understood. The word landed in her chest, like a blade between ribs. You're Cale Draven Aurelian. He didn't bow, didn't preen, simply stated the fact, as plain as weather. And I was poisoned. Liquid silver administered by those who sit at my own table. The room tilted. She gripped the doorframe. Lord Severn Vale? She whispered, and the name tasted like iron. Cale's amber eyes caught hers. You know him? Know him? A laugh scraped her throat raw. I know his handwriting on the bill that stole my father. I know his seal on the blood debt that stole my mother. I know his hounds in the forest the night Corrin Wynn went hunting and never came home. She was shaking. She made herself stop. They believe me dying or dead. Cale's jaw tightened. If they succeed, they'll take the throne. The realm will fracture. The winter deepens. And Omega's... He paused. They'll be culled, unnecessary mouths in a starving world. The window light had shifted, longer now, cutting the room in two, shadow and gold. I need to expose them. I need someone untainted, invisible, who can move where my guards cannot. He held out his hand. Not a command, an offer. Help me, and your debt dies. Your brother will be fed, educated, protected. You'll be free. She stared at his hand, calloused, strong. The hand of a man who could end her problems with a word. No. The word fell like a stone. Kyle didn't flinch. Explain. You want me to trust a power holder. She backed away, putting distance between them. You want me to believe erasure comes without a price. I've seen what your kind offers, Your Majesty. It smells like rosewater and tastes like ash. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered. Recognition, maybe, or grief. Your father, he said quietly, died fighting the system that strangles your brother. I believe you are his blood. I believe you have a choice he never did. To fight from inside the machinery, not crushed beneath it. The name hit her harder than any blow. Corrin Wynn. 7 years. 7 years since she'd heard that name spoken without contempt. 7 years since a hunting accident had stolen him from her mother's grief-ravaged arms. Her father's voice surfaced from memory, old as winter, warm as the hearth they'd shared. Some things are worth more than breath, Mouse. Some things are worth the fight. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she had her answer. I'll do it. Her voice didn't waver. Not for you, for Jonas, for him. Cale nodded slowly. Then we begin now. A knock came an hour later, sharp, commanding. Captain Rian Holt stood in the doorway, flanked by 6 guards in the king's colors. His eyes found Cale and went wide. He dropped to one knee, fist to chest, head bowed. Your Majesty. The gesture was foreign to Alara, a language of submission she'd never witnessed outside the old songs. Her stomach turned. Kyle straightened, visibly weakened but unbowed. Rise, Captain. We have work to do. Holt's gaze slid to Alara. Something passed through his expression. Calculation, perhaps, or warning. He said nothing. Kyle turned to her. Your worth was never a question. You've proven it. Now we prove it to the world. 2 guards took Jonas by the arms. He didn't struggle, just looked back at her with those gray storm eyes, trusting her, believing her. She watched them lead him away. Protective custody, they called it, a cage with a kinder name. Then the cold iron closed around her wrists, and they walked her out of Ember Hollow into the labyrinth beneath the Capitol. The Iron Maw. Chapter 2. The Machinery of Blood. The door slammed behind her with the finality of a coffin lid. Ilara hit the stone floor, knees cracking against basalt. The cell swallowed her. A black iron box no wider than her outstretched arms, walls sweating with cold, ceiling pressing down like a hand eager to crush. She did not move, did not cry, did not curse. The guards' boots echoed down the corridor, and then silence poured in like floodwater. Count, her mind whispered. Count to survive. She began with breaths. 1, 2, 3. The first beating came within the hour. They didn't announce it, simply opened the door. 3 of them, faces hidden behind iron half-masks, and set upon her with the efficiency of men butchering livestock. Boots to ribs, gloved fists to stomach, the flat of a blade to her spine that sent lightning through her legs. Harboring a regicide, one of them said, mechanical, reciting. Seditious conspiracy against the crown. Ilara curled into herself, making her body small as it had always learned to be. She felt the blows land and slide away, felt her flesh swell and bruise, but not break. They were careful not to kill her. Death was too quick, too merciful. Count. She reached 47 before they stopped. 53 before she could breathe without tasting copper. Black bread and water came on the 3rd interval. She had guessed at intervals now, timing the torch lighting, the distant screams that served as a ghastly clock. The slot in the door scraped open. A hand slid a wooden cup through, plus a heel of bread hard as stone. Ilara did not touch it. Her body screamed for sustenance. Her mind refused. Eating meant accepting. Accepting meant surviving for a purpose she had not chosen. Jonas's face surfaced in the darkness behind her eyelids. His cough. That rattling sound she had grown to fear more than any blade. Where is he? Is he safe? Are they hurting him to hurt me? The questions had no answers. The silence swallowed them whole. She pressed her back to the wall and counted the seconds until the torches guttered and the maw plunged into near-total darkness. On what she calculated as the 4th day, footsteps approached. Different rhythm. Heavier. Men struggling with weight. The door across the corridor opened with a grinding shriek of hinges. Ilara pressed her face to the bars, rusted cold, tasting of old blood, and watched them drag Cale Draven Aurelian into the cell opposite hers. His wound had been reopened. Fresh crimson stained his side, his leg, the rough bandages someone had applied and someone else had torn away. He was pale, weaker than before, but alive. Their eyes met through the gloom. The Winter Wolf, king of the mountain throne, lord of the Silver Pack, looked at her with something she might have called apology. Then he nodded. Once. I'm here. Hold. The guards retreated, the torches guttered, and Alara understood. The king was in a cage because cages were necessary, because somewhere above them, conspirators believed themselves winning. Because the trap required bait, and bait required the pretense of failure. She was not abandoned. She was not forgotten. She was part of the game. Ilara exhaled, closed her eyes, let her head fall back against the stone. Somewhere in the darkness, Jonas was breathing. She would believe that. She would hold it like a talisman against the cold. The silence stretched on, patient as death, but no longer empty. The guards grabbed her before she could process the movement. Two of them, their grip like iron bands around her upper arms, dragging her down corridors she had never seen, deeper into the maw, past cells that held screams rather than people, down a spiral staircase cut into living rock. The cold changed. It stopped being mere temperature and became presence, a weight that pressed against her chest with each step downward. They stopped before a door of black iron, older than the keep itself. One guard produced a key that glowed faintly blue, turned it, and the door swung inward. Beyond, a shaft. The starwell rose around her, a vertical tunnel carved through the mountain, open to the sky above where stars burned like scattered salt against black silk. Moonlight fell in a pale column, touching the center of the chamber where silver runes circled a drain-like basin. The markings pulsed with lunar rhythm, brightening and dimming as if the stone itself breathed. Ilara's breath misted in the air. Her lungs burned. "Kneel," one guard said. She refused. They forced her down anyway, her knees striking cold stone. "Wait!" she spat. "This isn't... Lord Vale wouldn't..." "Lord Vale does not know you are here," the voice came from shadow. From a corner so dark, Ilara had assumed it held nothing but stone. A figure emerged, willow tall, stooped, wrapped in layers of bark cloth and wool that smelled of peat and sage. The woman's hair fell white as river snow, braided with silver threads. Her eyes were clouded gray, tattooed with crescent sigils that seemed to shift and crawl in the torchlight. Sibylla Morwen of the Moon Court. The name surfaced from stories Ilara's mother had whispered long ago, when the world was kinder and fire pits seemed warm. The seer moved forward, her knotted willow staff tapping against stone. She stopped before Ilara, studying her with those clouded yet seeing eyes. "You carry Silvermane blood, child." Sibylla's voice cracked like ice over a frozen pond, ancient and heavy. "Your mother's line, hidden. Your father knew it. That is why he was killed." The words should have meant nothing. They meant everything. "No." The denial came before thought. "I can't shift. I've never shifted. I'm broken. An Omega without power, marked defective since I was 15. The healers tested me. The Lord's physicians confirmed it." Sibylla stepped closer, her willow-tall frame bent toward Ilara like a tree in winter wind. "You were never broken. You were hidden by your own blood's refusal to surface." The seer's voice dropped lower. "Shame is a seal. You sealed yourself to survive." Ilara opened her mouth to argue, to deny, to insist that she knew her own body. The old woman's hand shot out. Her fingers touched Ilara's left ribs, pressing against the silver wolf birthmark hidden beneath threadbare cloth. The touch burned cold. The chamber vanished. The stars vanished. The cold vanished. Visions slammed through her. Her mother, Lisa, shifting into a great silver wolf beneath a harvest moon, fur rippling like water, eyes glowing silver, beautiful and free before winter fever ate the ability away. Her father, Corin, gathering scattered Mooncourt refugees in the Myers' hidden cellars, planning resistance, passing documents wrapped in oilcloth. Prophecy whispered in voices older than language. A girl with ash-brown hair and storm-gray eyes who would break the winter and remake the hierarchy or die screaming within it. The visions released her. Ilara gasped, air flooding her lungs like her first breath after drowning. Sibylla stepped back, her weathered face unreadable. "The choice is yours, child," the seer's voice echoed in the starwell. "Claim it or bury it, but know, the realm is listening. The stones remember. Spring waits for a howl that sounds like mercy." The guards grabbed Ilara's arms again. They dragged her back through the black iron door, up the spiral stairs, through corridors that blurred together. They threw her into her cell. Ilara hit the stone floor. The door slammed shut. The lock turned. She knelt there, shaking, not from cold, not from the beating she knew would come again, but from the weight of an identity she did not want and could not refuse. Somewhere above, the moon shone on. The cell door opened at the third bell when the guard rotation left the underkeep undermanned, and Vale's eyes turned elsewhere. 2 men dragged Ilara from her cell. She expected the beating to continue. Instead, they hauled her down a corridor she'd never seen. A passage hidden behind a tapestry of hunting hounds, narrow and choked with dust. Beyond it, a chamber. Small, stone-walled, lit by a single tallow candle. Kyle Draven Aurelian sat on a makeshift pallet, his wounds bandaged, but his eyes sharp as the blade at his belt. "Leave us," he said. The guards obeyed, the door sealed behind them. "You've been busy," Ilara said, rubbing her raw wrists. "Corrupting your own prison guards." "They were never Vale's. They were mine, planted years ago for a day I hoped would never come." He rose, movements economical despite the injury she'd seen him bear. "Sit. We have little time." She didn't sit. She stood instead, arms crossed, waiting. Kale told her of the council, how Lord Severin had spent decades buying loyalty with silver and leverage, poisoning advisors until the king's own inner circle served Vale's ambitions. He spoke of the full moon ceremony, the ritual gathering where the realm renewed its oaths, where the king stood exposed before his people. "Vale will move then," Kale said. "Not with an army, with a knife and a crowd. The perfect assassination looks like tragedy." "And me?" "You were never random." His voice flattened. "Vale fabricated your blood debt. Your father's opposition to the tithe increase made him dangerous. Killing Corn openly would have sparked revolt. So Vale buried him in paperwork and buried you in debt. Waiting." Ilara's jaw tightened. "Waiting for what?" "For me to need bait." Kale met her gaze. "Your brother's life depends on my death staying secret. If Vale learns I'm alive, Jonas dies. Tonight." The words landed like stones in still water. "He's safe?" "For now. Watched. Collateral." Kyle moved toward a niche in the wall, retrieving 2 wooden practice swords. "That ends when I reclaim my throne. Until then, you train." "I don't need—" "You need to survive what comes." He tossed her a sword. It was blunt, unpracticed, but the weight felt right in her palm. "Vale thinks you're broken. Use that. Let him keep thinking it until your blade finds his throat. She didn't move. I'm not a killer. No, you're a sister. Kale took a stance, weapon raised. That's worse. That's why you'll win. The first strike came fast. Elara blocked it by instinct, wooden blade jarring against wood. The second came harder. She stumbled back. The third grazed her shoulder, pain lancing through muscle. Again. They traded blows through the night. Kyle was precise, economical, each movement teaching something her body hadn't learned in the mire's desperate scrapping. Where to place a blade. How to read weight shifting in a stance. How to turn pain into leverage instead of surrender. She caught on fast. Too fast. In the fourth round, she had him pinned. Sword at his throat, breath ragged, victory blazing through her chest. Then she saw herself reflected in his eyes. Wild, fierce, a thing uncontained. She flinched. Kale didn't move. The wooden blade stayed at his neck, trembling. When you're cornered, he said quietly, you fight like you'll die before you submit. That's good, but you flinch from victory like it poisons you. Why? I'm not a monster. The words came out cracked. Your father taught me that power without restraint becomes tyranny. He held her gaze. But power surrendered becomes servitude. You must learn to hold it without either extreme. Elara lowered the sword. I don't want power. I want my brother alive. Kyle stepped back, resetting his stance. Then you must be willing to kill for him. Not because you want to kill, but because loving him means that choice exists in you. The candle guttered. Somewhere above, guards shouted, distant, meaningless. They trained until dawn. Muscles screamed. Bruises bloomed across her ribs and shoulders. But her hands knew the sword now, knew its language, knew how to speak back when struck. Sibylla Morwen appeared at the chamber's edge near midnight, wrapped in shadow, watching. She said nothing. When the session ended, she simply nodded once, a seal of approval, or perhaps a debt being acknowledged, and vanished back into the dark. The guards returned at first light. Elara went back to her cell. But her hands remembered, and somewhere beneath her ribs, where the silver wolf birthmark slept, something stirred. The star well opened to a sky scrubbed clean of clouds, the half-wax moon hanging like a blade poised to fall. Sibylla waited at the basin center, her staff planted before her, bone charms chiming in some wind Elara could not feel. You know what I offer? The seer's voice carried no warmth. The silver mane is not a gift. It is a weight that will crack your bones and remake them. Once claimed, you cannot unsee. You cannot unfeel. The quiet life you carved from nothing. It ends tonight. Elara stood at the chamber's threshold, muscle still aching from Kyle's training. I didn't ask for this. No one asks for lightning. Sibylla's clouded eyes found hers. They only ask whether they will stand or kneel when it strikes. The seer moved first, circling the basin, fingers dragging through silver runoff until her hands gleamed. She spoke in a tongue older than the realm's walls, words that pressed against Elara's skull like thumbs. The runes around the basin ignited, pale fire crawling across stone. Kneel. Elara's knees hit cold rock. Sibylla's palm found the silver wolf birthmark, and the world split open. Not visions this time. Something deeper, a hook behind her ribs, pulling truth up through her throat. Her mouth opened before her mind could protest. I am afraid. The words scraped out raw. If I claim strength, I will use it to become cruel. I am afraid I am not better than the men who broke me. Silence. The moon's light pooled around them, patient as death. Sibylla spoke, and her voice was not kind. Fear is honest. It is your armor. But armor that cannot move is a tomb. Your father's blood was not cruel. Your mother's line was not cruel. The Silvermane does not feed on fear. It feeds on protection. That is why they hunted it. Because a power that chooses the weak over the strong unmakes their world. The hook pulled again. Elara gasped and shifted. Her fingers split, bone extending into silver claws that caught moonlight and threw it. Her vision sharpened, the Starwell's stones suddenly alive with heat signatures, with fear scent flooding her nostrils from cells above, from guards and prisoners, and every trembling heartbeat in the maw. Her voice dropped, harmonics layering over each other, echoing off walls like a chorus of wolves. It burned. Every nerve screamed as if her blood had turned to molten silver. She heard herself cry out, a sound that was not entirely her own. Then it stopped. Elara crumpled, claws retracting, vision dimming to merely human. Her chest heaved. Sweat or blood, she couldn't tell, ran down her face. I felt... She struggled for words. Everything, everyone, every fear in this place, every rage. Sibylla stepped back, replacing the staff's weight to her hand. That is the curse and the gift. You will always feel them now. The question is whether you respond with cruelty or with choice. The seer moved toward the passage, pausing only once. Rest. You have hours, not days. Then she was gone. The moon continued its climb. Elara stayed on the cold stone, trembling, eyes catching light like a predator's. Kyle arrived with guards at his back. They left him at the chamber's mouth and retreated. He found her there, still shaking, still silver-edged. He knelt, his wrist extended toward her, veins visible, pulse jumping beneath skin. The ancient gesture. Submission. Trust. Ilara's claws sprouted without her willing them. Silver tips hovered a breath from his skin. She could end him. One stroke. The thought flickered through her and recoiled. She pulled back. The choice cost more than drawing blood would have. Her claws receded, hands curling into fists in her lap. You are not the monster you fear. Kale's voice was rough, scraped raw. You are the answer the realm has been waiting for. Ilara's whisper barely filled the space between them. Then why does it feel like I am being forged into a weapon? Kale's answer held something secret, something she couldn't yet read. Because you are. And weapons choose their targets. That is what makes you different. Elara counted the guard rotations in her sleep now. 3rd bell, 7th bell, the changing of the wolf ward. She'd mapped the maw like she'd once mapped Frostbite Alley's dumpsters and blind spots, a survival calculus learned in hunger. The guard who'd brought her water yesterday had trembling hands. She'd noticed the tremor, the way his eyes darted to the corridor before settling on her. A loyalist, then. Kale's man, pretending to serve Vale. She caught his wrist as he set down the bowl. How many of you? His breath stopped. She felt his pulse jackrabbit against her fingers. I don't know what You do. She released him. Neither do I, but I'd like to. That night, a scrap of paper appeared in her cell, tucked beneath the thin quilt. 2 words, storage level, and a scratched symbol, a key. She'd found the corridor on her 3rd unaccompanied movement through the maw, when guards began misplacing her on the way back from Starwell sessions. They'd wordlessly steer her past iron-banded doors, let their eyes linger on certain walls, asking without asking. The storage level was supposed to hold grain and salted meat for the prison population. What it held instead was a key tucked behind a loose stone in an alcove marked only with a wolf's head scratched into plaster. Ilara took it. The door behind the grain sacks opened onto stairs descending into cold that bit deeper than the maw's upper reaches. Her breath fogged. The walls here were newer, cut stone, fitted tight, no crumbling mortar. Someone had built this passage recently, and with purpose. The laboratory sprawled at the bottom. Glass vessels lined benches, filled with liquids that caught the guttering torchlight. Mercury silver she recognized from Jonas's cough sire recipes. Her mother had used tiny amounts, carefully measured. Here, the silver ran in bowls, in vials, in long tubes connected to things she couldn't name. Journals bound in human skin sat open on a desk. She read enough to understand. Lord Vale's private workshop, where he'd perfected the poison that nearly killed Kale. Where he'd tested efficiency on Omega prisoners, subjects whose deaths would never be questioned. She took everything she could carry. Captain Rian Holt reviewed the manifest for the third time. Flour deliveries had decreased by 12 sacks since the new moon. Salted pork, down by half. The numbers didn't match the kitchen logs, and the kitchen logs didn't match what he'd seen stacked in the storerooms. He pulled the cell roster next, cross-referencing names against his mental map of who belonged where. Certain corridors were being skipped. Cell Block 7, the deep cells near the old waterworks. When he'd asked about it, the duty guard had shrugged and said, "Orders from above." Orders from above. The phrase made his jaw tight. He'd told himself for years that orders were just orders. He'd built a career on that lie, fed it like a fire, let it warm him through the worst of what the maw contained. Men who asked questions became men who were questioned. Better to be efficient, to be trusted, to rise high enough that someone else made the ugly calls. But Ember Hollow wouldn't leave him. The girl's face when she'd opened that door, the way she'd positioned herself between him and whatever lay within. She'd known what he was. She'd faced it anyway. And now, there was the boy. Holt had found Jonas Corin Wynn by accident, pulled from a transport list he'd had no reason to examine. The name had caught his eye. Wynn. Same surname as the prisoner who'd been beaten nearly to death last week. The one who'd been harboring the king's would-be assassin. The boy was in Block 7, isolated. The report said protective custody, but Holt knew what isolation did to children. He'd seen it in the mines before his conscription, in the orphanages that fed the army. Fear and silence, eating away at the foundations of self. He told himself it wasn't his concern. The boy was leverage. Vale's insurance against the sister. Leverage was the game, and Holt had learned long ago not to question the game's rules, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking when he signed the transfer order. "Closer to his sister," he told the clerk. "Quarantine violation. They were exposed to the same illness in the slums." The clerk didn't blink. "I'll note it." That night, Holt walked the corridors himself. He found the storage-level key where he'd left it, where a certain prisoner would be able to find it if she'd learned to move through shadows the way the slums taught their children. Then he went to the wardroom and poured himself something that burned going down. The walls in the maw were thick, but the gaps between stones let sound through if you knew where to listen. Jonas had learned to listen. "Sister?" His voice cracked on the word, a sound thin as paper. A pause, then muffled but unmistakable. "Joe." Ilara's voice. Close now. Close enough that she might be able to touch the wall if she stretched. "You're alive." The relief in it nearly broke her. I didn't know." "I'm here." Her voice was steady in the way she'd learned to make it, the way she'd spoken through years of hunger and fear and keeping him alive. "I'm here, and I'm not leaving. Do you understand?" A wet sound. He was crying. She was crying too, she realized. Tears she didn't have the luxury of wiping away. I understand. Captain Holt moved you? I don't know who. Someone opened the door and said I was being relocated. I thought they were taking me to die. No. Ilara's voice sharpened into something fiercer. No. You're alive. That's what matters. Whatever else happens, you're alive. Jonas pressed his palm against the cold stone, imagining she could feel the pressure through it. The man who was in your room, the king, is he? He's alive. He's fighting. We're all fighting. The guard footsteps echoed down the corridor. Jonas pulled back from the wall, pressing himself into the corner of his cell. The footsteps passed. Silence returned. I'll find you, Ilara whispered. I promise. Jonas closed his eyes. I'll be here. In the darkness of two cells separated by stone and iron, the Wind siblings held on to each other through sound alone, the last thread keeping them tethered to the world above winter. The evidence went to Kyle in pieces. Ilara smuggled out what she could carry, passed it through the loyalist guards, received nods of acknowledgement that meant nothing and everything. Kyle read the journals in his chamber, face unreadable. Sibylla stood beside him, staff planted on the stone floor like a root. 4 council members, the seer said. You have enough to name them. Not publicly. Kyle closed the journal. Vale expects me to act. He wants a confrontation. He has the arena prepared, the narrative written. If I expose him now, he claims martyrdom. His remaining allies rally. Then what? Kale's amber eyes caught the torchlight. I remove them quietly. Illness, retirement, a hunting accident in the northern reaches. He stood. The coup requires his network. Severin has spent years cultivating, but cultivation takes time. Time I can steal. Within a week, Lord Haston resigned his seat on the council, citing declining health. Lord Merrick requested transfer to the border holds. 2 lesser lords simply vanished from the court records, their households sealed for investigation. New faces appeared in the council chamber. Loyalists who owed nothing to Vale, whose loyalty could be called upon when the time came. The machinery cracked. The gears ground, but something had shifted in their alignment. A hairline fracture spreading through the hole. Ilara felt it in the maw. Fewer guards at post. Fewer eyes tracking her movements. The ambient fear that had saturated the stones began to thin, replaced by something she didn't recognize. Uncertainty. The system's own doubt. Bleeding through stone. She pressed her hand against the wall again, listening for Jonas's breath, and allowed herself to feel something close to hope. Lord Severin Vale stood at the window of his private chamber, watching snow fall on the iron maw's outer wall. The flakes caught the torchlight and glittered like scattered silver, a beautiful contrast to the ugliness unfolding beneath his roof. My lord, the voice came from behind him, trembling. We have a problem. Vale didn't turn. Speak. Lord Haston has resigned. Merrick requested transfer to the border holds. 2 of our people in the council have simply vanished. The conspirator, a minor lord named Crane, who had attached himself to Vale's cause like a leech, cleared his throat. Someone is moving against us from within the fortress itself. The evidence from the laboratory has been taken. Journals, records, everything. Now Vale turned, his pale eyes fixed on Crane with the cold intensity of a predator regarding wounded prey. Who? We don't know. The guards report nothing unusual, but someone has access to the lower levels. Someone who knows the passages. Vale's jaw tightened. The Silver Mane bloodline. The girl in the dungeon. He had underestimated her. allowed her to exist as a triviality, a piece on a board he intended to sacrifice. But Sibylla Morwen had been in these walls. The seer had been moving pieces while he watched the wrong game. "Fetch her," Vale said. "The Wind Girl. Bring her to the Starwell." "My lord." "Do as I command." Crane bowed and fled. Vale moved to his desk, pulling open a drawer to reveal a crystal vial filled with liquid silver. The poison gleamed like mercury, beautiful in its lethality. He had perfected it over years. A slow death that could be accelerated or delayed, a leash made of metal. The door burst open. Guards dragged a figure between them. Kyle Draven Aurelian, the so-called Winter Wolf, now pale and gaunt from the poison already running through his veins. They threw him to the floor at Vale's feet. "Ah," Vale smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "The king himself. I wondered when you would wake." Kyle raised his head. His amber eyes burned with defiance despite the tremor in his limbs. "Vale, get him a chair. He's still a king, after all. Let him die with dignity." The guards hauled Kyle into a chair. He slumped there, breathing hard, the sweat beading on his forehead, evidence of the poison's work. "You know why you're here," Vale said, circling him. "You know what I want." "The throne!" Kyle's voice was hoarse. "You've wanted it long enough." "I want order." Vale stopped in front of him. "Do you understand? I want a realm that functions, the way it was meant to function. Hierarchy, structure, the strong leading, the weak serving. This..." He gestured at the chains binding Kyle's wrists. "This is what leadership requires. Sometimes you must break what is broken." "You're insane." "I'm honest." Vale returned to his desk, pouring a goblet of wine. "Your father was a fool. Your mother was worse. They believed Omegas had souls, believed they could be integrated into society as equals. Look what their softness produced. A century of winter, a realm starving. The old ways were correct. Tithe the weak for the strength of the many. The tithe kills them. The tithe purifies them. Those who survive are stronger. Those who don't were never meant to live." Vale sipped his wine. "And then there's you, the great Kyle Draven Aurelian, the king who pities the Omega, who dreams of reform." His smile twisted. "Did you really think you could change the nature of the world? I think I can try. You can die." Vale set down the goblet and retrieved the crystal vial. "That's what you can do, as can your precious Silvermane." Kale's eyes flickered. He said nothing. Vale leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Yes, I know what she is, what she's becoming. A fen-born Omega who shifts into silver. The last of the Silvermane bloodline." He traced a finger along Kyle's jaw. "Do you understand what that means? A despised girl who transforms into a queen makes mockery of order itself. She must die. She must die screaming, so that every Omega in this realm understands. There is no salvation. There is only submission." He straightened, moving to a side table where a chalice waited. He poured the liquid silver into it, the metal catching the torchlight. "Here's your choice, Winterwolf. Drink this. Declare me regent before the court, and watch the girl die cleanly in the arena." He paused. "Or refuse and watch her be torn apart by the crowd while you bleed out from this." Kyle stared at the chalice, at the silver liquid that promised a quicker death, a cleaner death, if he simply surrendered everything he had fought for. "Your brother and sister died for this throne," Vale added. "Would you like to join them?" Kale's hand trembled as he reached for the chalice. Vale's smile widened. Then Kale's hand closed around the stem and hurled the chalice across the room. It shattered against the stone wall, silver splattering across the frost-pale firs like scattered stars. No. The word hung in the air. Vale's smile died. Then you die hard. He gestured to the guards. Take him to the lowest cell. Let him rot. The guards dragged Kyle away. He didn't struggle, didn't beg, only looked back at Vale with those amber eyes that burned with something the Lord could not name. Fear, perhaps, or certainty. Vale watched him go, feeling the first crack of doubt spread through his certainty. But no, he had won. The king was dying, the girl would follow, and the full moon ceremony would see the end of the Aurelian line. He had won. In the lowest cell of the maw, Kale slumped against the wall. His body burned. The poison was active now, racing through his bloodstream, eating at his organs with silver teeth. 3 days, perhaps less. But his refusal had been seen. His signal had been sent. In the capital above, the remaining loyalists moved, securing the armory, the gates, the communications tower. The pieces were in motion. The full moon ceremony would come, and with it, the battle for the realm's soul. The moon hung fat and heavy above Haifang, and Sibylla Morwen's hands smelled of silver dust and sage. Again, the old seer's voice cut through the Starwell's chill. Feel the tide, child, not just the moon. Every heartbeat that bends toward power. Ilara knelt at the basin edge, fingers submerged in water that had been blessed and bitter. 3 nights of this, 3 nights of Sibylla's chanting, her own blood drawn and mixed with river pebble ink. Her body stretched between human frailty and something older. Each session left her emptier and fuller at once, like a vessel being cracked open to pour in something larger than herself. She felt it now. The thread of loyalty running through the maw's stones, through the palace walls, through the hidden halls where loyalists whispered, alphas who served Vale, alphas who served the crown, alphas who served only survival. They're afraid, Ilara breathed. The ones who serve the king. They're afraid they'll die. Good. Sibylla touched Ilara's shoulder. Fear is honest. It tells you who will break first. Now feel the others, the ones who serve Vale because they believe in his order. Ilara closed her eyes. The threads multiplied, red and silver, tangled like a wolf's pelt. Some burned with conviction. Others guttered like candle flames in draught. Those will bend, Sibylla said. When the moment comes, they'll bend. But you must be the wind that breaks them, not the wall they shatter against. In the hidden chamber beneath the eastern barracks, Kale Draven Aurelian coughed blood into a silk handkerchief that Ilara had stolen from a noble's laundry. You shouldn't be here. His voice scraped like frost on stone. Every moment you spend tending me is a moment Vale uses to strengthen his position. Ilara ignored him, pressing a fresh cloth to his forehead. The poison had progressed faster than anyone expected. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and his amber eyes, once so fierce, now held a desperate, feverish light. Sibylla says you'll survive the ceremony. She kept her voice flat. Barely. Barely is enough. A ghost of his old smile crossed his face. I've survived worse. You haven't? Ilara sat back on her heels. This is worse. This is... dying? Kale reached for her hand. His fingers were cold, but his grip was firm. Yes, I can feel it. The silver eats at me from the inside. But Ilara... He pulled her closer until she could see the reflection of moonlight in his dying eyes. Listen to me. When the bond completes, when we mate in truth, It will change you. You will feel me, even when I'm gone. My heart will echo in your chest. My blood will call to yours, and you will think it a curse. It's not? No. His thumb traced circles on her palm. If you love me, my death does not erase you. It frees you. That is the covenant, the true covenant, not the blood debt, not the tithe, not the law. The covenant between those who choose each other. Ilara's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to rage, to tell him she hadn't chosen anything, that she'd been dragged into this by circumstance and desperation, and the desperate need to keep Jonas alive. But the bond whispered between them, and she knew he was right. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to be what you're asking. You already are. Kyle's eyes drifted closed. You're the shield. You've always been the shield. That's what makes you the Silvermane, not the claws, not the howl. The need to protect. Across the city, in a cellar that smelled of peat and old secrets, Jonas Wynne sat surrounded by strangers. The woman called Moth had brought him here 3 nights ago, through passages that wound beneath the mire like a second city. She was fen-born, tall and weathered, with a scar that split her eyebrow and a kindness in her voice that made Jonas's chest ache. You're safe here, Moth said, handing him a bowl of broth. Your sister made sure of that. She doesn't know I'm here. Jonas stared at the broth. She thinks I'm still in the maw. She knows now. Holt sent word. Moth sat across from him. You're going to be part of what happens, Jonas. Are you ready? Jonas thought of Ilara, her hands rough from work, her eyes hard from survival, her voice always telling him to run when she should have run herself. What does she need me to do? Moth smiled, but it was a serious smile. Nothing yet. Just be ready. When the time comes, you'll understand. He nodded, still staring at the broth. Somewhere above him, the moon was rising. Somewhere in the palace, Lord Severin Vale was preparing his final moves. And somewhere in the Iron Maw, his sister was learning to howl. In the Lord's study, Vale received word from his agents. The northern houses stand ready, Crane reported. 3,000 troops within striking distance of the capital. The ceremony will be surrounded. And the girl? Still in the maw. Still training with the seer. She's becoming more than we anticipated, my lord. Vale dismissed this with a wave. She's a fen-born gutter rat with delusions of power. Let her play at being a wolf. When the ceremony comes, she will die like one. Cornered, terrified, begging. He turned to the window, watching the moon. Let the preparations continue. Tomorrow, the realm sees its new dawn. In the Starwell, Ilara's transformation began. Her bones cracked, her skin silvered, and somewhere in the distance, a dying king felt her howl tear through his chest like a second heartbeat. The gathering was complete. The storm was near. Chapter 3. The Breaking of Winter. The crimson moon hung heavy over Frosthearth, its light staining the snow-dusted stones of the Howl Crown a deep arterial red. Thousands had gathered. Nobles in frost-pale furs clustered at the amphitheater's apex. Alphas in ceremonial regalia, forming a ring around the central pit. Priests intoning the old tongue in rhythms older than the kingdom itself. And scattered throughout, the Omegas, servants, attendants, laborers, watched their own reckoning draw near with eyes that had learned not to hope. The ceremony began as it always had, with oaths. By moon and blood we affirm the order. High Priest Aldrich's voice rang out, amplified by the acoustics of the menhirs. Alpha submits to none. Omega serves by nature. The realm endures. Alphas along the outer ring shifted, their forms rippling with controlled power. Wolves of gray and black and white, muscles coiled beneath silver-frosted fur. They held their poses, demonstration of dominance, while Omegas throughout the crowd dropped to their knees, foreheads pressed to frozen stone. Kael was brought forth. The king's appearance drew a sharp intake of breath across the amphitheater. Where once he had stood as the winter wolf, tall, broad-shouldered, predatory grace now hollowed by poison. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and his hands trembled with a tremor that spoke of organ failure. The liquid silver was eating him from within, and there was no hiding it now. His Majesty suffers from a grave ailment. Lord Severin Vale's voice cut through the silence, smooth as silk over steel. He stood at the apex, silvered hair catching the crimson moonlight, pale eyes surveying his domain. The rigors of rule have proven too much for his constitution. I, as Lord Protector, shall assume regency until the realm recovers from this unfortunate circumstance. The lie was so clean it gleamed. Elara watched from the crowd, her presence unrecognized. Lunar white leathers, traced with argent whorls, clung to her frame, the silver wolf birthmark on her left ribcage glowing faintly beneath the fabric. Her storm-gray eyes burned amber bright, and her skin held a luminescence that had nothing to do with the moon above. A gasp rippled through the Howl crown. Someone noticed, then another. Then the murmur became a tide. Prophecy, someone whispered. The silver mane. Vale's gaze found her, and his smile faltered for just a moment before reforming into something colder. You, he said, his voice carrying easily across the amphitheater. The gutter rat who fancies herself a legend, come to die before the realm. Elara walked forward. The crowd parted for her, not from respect, but from the instinct that came with facing something unknown. She moved to the circle's center, where the ancient stones met and stopped. I claim trial by voice, she said, her voice carrying without shouting. The old law was seldom invoked, but it had never been repealed. The accused faces the accuser. Ritual combat. Vale's laugh was soft, dismissive. You challenge me, girl? I have hunted wolves since before you were born. I have killed your kind for sport. You killed my father. Ilara's voice didn't waver. Corin Wynn? You had him murdered for resisting your tithe increases. You fabricated a blood debt to enslave my family. You have broken countless Omegas to maintain your precious hierarchy. She paused. I am the voice of the voiceless you silenced. I am the reckoning you never expected. The amphitheater had gone silent. Vale's cane came up, the concealed blade catching crimson moonlight. Words are wind, gutter rat. Let us see if your claws match your mouth. He struck. Elara didn't flinch. She shifted. The transformation was instantaneous. A tremendous silver wolf where the girl had stood, standing taller than any alpha present, fur rippling with lunar light, claws extended, eyes burning amber. The blade passed through empty air. The amphitheater erupted. Alphas shifted throughout the crowd, some in challenge, some in instinctive response to her dominance. But something strange happened as Ilara's gaze swept across them. Where her eyes touched, they found themselves bowing, not from coercion, but from recognition. The compulsion of love, Sibylla had called it. The silver mane's true power, not dominion, but the way her howl carried such protection that submission became a choice freely made. Vale stumbled back, his composure cracking. This is impossible. Captain Holt. Ilara's voice came, human again, cutting through the chaos. The exit. Ryan Holt stepped forward, flanked by loyalists, blocking the path where Vale had been edging. Lord Severin Vale, you are under arrest for treason, attempted regicide, and crimes against Omega persons. Vale's pale eyes went wide. You dare! I do! Holt's voice was flat. The realm sees you now. There is no hiding what you are. Around them, the Howl Crown trembled on the edge of transformation. The old order was breaking, and something new was being born in the crimson moonlight. Kyle Draven Aurelian moved to the circle's center. The crowd parted for him, not in the way they had for Alara, but with the hesitant reverence given to a dying god. His steps were unsteady, each one a battle against the silver eating through his veins. The gray pallor had deepened to something almost translucent, and when he raised his hand to steady himself against a menhir, the tremor was visible from the highest rows. The realm watched. 10,000 souls held their breath as the king and the silver girl faced each other in the heart of the Howl Crown. I am dying, Kyle said. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, yet somehow carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. The poison has won, but I die seeing the realm remade in your image, not mine. A ghost of his former smile crossed his face. That is enough. Ilara's hands shook. Silver luminescence traced along her fingertips, fading in and out like a heartbeat struggling to maintain its rhythm. The transformation had cost her. Every moment in that form burned energy she didn't have to spare. No, she said. The word came out broken, more breath than sound. She reached for him. Her hands found his chest, pressing against the lamellar armor, and she closed her eyes. Somewhere deep inside her, the silver mane stirred, not in hunger, but in something older. She felt the bond between them, that thread of fate that had drawn them together, and she pulled at it, trying to draw the poison out through sheer will and love. The silver in his veins flared. Nothing happened. Ilara tried again, harder, her claws extending involuntarily, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could feel the liquid silver, could sense its malignancy, but it had woven itself too deeply into his organs, his blood, his bones. It was part of him now. I can't, she whispered. I can't. Kale's hand found hers. His fingers were cold, but his grip was gentle. My death is not defeat if it births a new order. He lifted her chin with his other hand, forcing her to meet his eyes. The amber fire in them had dulled, but something warm remained. Let me go. Become what you must become without the weight of saving me. The choice opened before her like a chasm. She could feel it, the power of the Howl Crown, the gathered presence of thousands of alphas, the thin membrane between mortal and divine that the ancient stones had cultivated for centuries. She was Luna Queen now, recognized by the realm, bound to the ceremony. She could demand his life as her right. She could take the power she was due and pull him back from the edge. The thought tempted her. God, it tempted her. But she saw what it would cost. She would become the monster the realm already feared, someone who wielded love as a weapon, who took what she wanted regardless of consent. She would perpetuate the very cycle of dominance that had kept Omegas broken for centuries. Ilara released him. She stepped back, and her howl ripped from her throat. The sound was not like any wolf cry the alphas had ever heard. It was pure agony and pure love, grief and transformation woven into a single note that vibrated through stone and bone and blood. Every alpha present felt it in their chest, felt their hearts stutter and their knees want to buckle. Kyle's last breath left his body in sync with her cry. The amphitheater fell silent. Not quiet, silent. The wind stopped. The snow hung suspended in the air. Even winter itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Sibylla Morwen stood at the circle's edge, her clouded gray eyes tracking every moment. When Ilara's howl faded into the mountain air, the old seer nodded once, a small, knowing gesture that carried the weight of decades. Ilara had chosen the sacrifice that broke cycles rather than perpetuated them. The howl did not end. It stretched beyond the amphitheater, beyond the cliffs, beyond the mountain ring that had cradled the realm in ice for 100 years. Ilara felt it leave her, not abandoning her, but expanding, becoming something larger than her body could contain. The sound was hers, and not hers, the voice of every Omega who had ever been told they were less. Every Fenborn who had hidden in the marshes, every child born into blood debt. The stones beneath her feet hummed. She opened her eyes, though she hadn't realized they'd been closed, and watched ice crack along the rim of the amphitheater. Water trickled where frost had reigned supreme for generations. Snowflakes, caught in some impossible current, drifted upward instead of down, rising toward a sky that was no longer black but deepening into blue, then violet, then a color she had no name for but recognized in her bones as beginning. The crowd gasped. Thousands of faces turned upward, mouths open, eyes wide with terror and wonder in equal measure. In the capital's highest towers, candles guttered as warm wind crept through cracked shutters. In Greywater's tenements, children ran to windows, watching frost recede from window panes for the first time in their lives. In the northern silver mines, pickaxes rang against stone as the cold loosened its grip on exhausted hands. In the marshlands, elders wept into their palms, whispering the old words they'd kept alive through generations of hiding. Spring. Impossible, undeniable, accelerating spring. Ilara's body burned. She felt it, the transformation peaking, her human form straining against what she was becoming. Silver light traced along her arms, her neck, her face, and then it was too much. Her knees buckled. She fell, and the fall was long, longer than the distance from standing to the cold stone beneath her. She tasted copper and moonlight, blood, silver-tinged, impossible, traced from the corners of her eyes down her cheeks. Her mouth filled with it, and she turned her head to the side, spitting, but the flow didn't stop. The amphitheater was changing. Alphas who had stood rigid with shock began to kneel. Not the forced submission she'd compelled earlier, but something else, voluntary, reverent, their heads bowing as they witnessed what they could not command or understand. Omegas rose from their servant positions throughout the crowd, standing tall for the first time in their lives, their chains falling away as if the howl had cut them. Jonas was running. She saw him, mousy hair, blue scarf, thin shoulders pumping as he pushed through the crowd. His face was streaked with tears, and his cough rattled even from this distance, but he didn't stop. Sibylla reached her first. The old seer's arms caught her before she hit the stone again, gathering her close, and Ilara felt the woman's trembling. Exhaustion, fear, something else. Sibylla's voice rose in the old Mooncourt tongue, words older than the kingdom, and with each phrase, Ilara felt something binding her to life, pulling her back from whatever edge she'd leapt toward. The cost was visible in Sibylla, too. The seer's tattoos dimming, her clouded eyes clearing for just a moment before fading again. This was the last of her. Ilara understood that with sudden, terrible clarity. Sibylla was spending everything. "Don't!" Ilara managed, the word thick with silver. "Quiet, child." Sibylla's hands were steady despite the cost. "You chose mercy over power. You chose release over control. You broke the cycle. The seer's chanting continued, and Ilara felt the bleeding slow. Not stopping, but slowing, enough to breathe, enough to stay. Jonas reached them. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hand finding hers, and his grip was fierce despite his thin frame. "You did it," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "You actually did it." The sky deepened toward dawn. The Howl Crown, which had been a place of judgment and dominance for centuries, had become something else entirely. A sanctuary, a beginning, a promise kept. Far below, in the Iron Maw's deepest cell, Lord Severin Vale pressed his palms against the stone wall and listened to the howl still echoing through the mountain. He had been so certain of his philosophy. Power was dominion. Survival was dominance. The strong existed to rule the weak. The sound that reached him now disproved everything. Weeks passed like thawing ice, slowly, then all at once. Ilara recovered in fragments. Her body remembered what it had channeled, silver scars tracing her ribs, her shoulders, the curve of her jaw where the light had poured out. She moved slower now, felt deeper. The emotions of others washed through her still, but she was learning to set boundaries, to build walls not from fear, but from choice. The realm reorganized around her. Lord Severin Vale faced public trial in the Howl Crown's shadow. The amphitheater had become something else now. Stones glowing faintly even in daylight, a monument to the old order transformed into a commons for the new one. Vale's crimes were documented in full. Fabricated blood debts, murdered dissidents, the poison that had killed Kyael Draven Aurelian. Council chambers that had once echoed with alpha commands now included Omega voices as equals. The reckoning was not violent, it was worse, it was transparent. Kale's sacrifice was honored. His memory lived in the restructuring. Ilara accepted a title not as subservient queen, but as Luna Witness, a role that made her co-equal with any future king, bound by law to speak for the voiceless. She would not wear a crown. She would carry a voice. Jonas grew stronger in the spring warmth. His cough loosened, and he spent mornings in Ember Hollow, learning the herb craft their mother had practiced in secret. The knowledge was no longer forbidden. It was sacred now, taught openly to anyone who wanted to learn. He dried herbs in the sunlight that finally flooded through the tenement's window, and he smiled more than Ilara had ever seen. Sibylla Morwen returned to public honor as the Moon Court's keeper. Her tattoos had faded. Her eyes clouded again, but her voice carried weight when she spoke. She gathered scattered Fenborn refugees, documented prophecy, ensured the Silvermane history would never again be hidden. She had given everything to save Ilara. She would spend her remaining years making sure it mattered. Captain Rian Holt became the chief architect of a reformed guard structure. He found kinship with other soldiers who had been waiting for permission to do the right thing. Men and women who had enforced unjust laws while quietly hating themselves for it. The guard now served the realm rather than the elite. Justice was no longer a performance. The false blood debts were erased. Thousands of Omegas walked free, their chains not cut, but dissolved by the simple fact that chains could no longer hold. The labor system restructured into fair exchange. Omega children were no longer tested for shifts. The test itself was abolished because powerlessness was no longer defined as broken. Ember Hollow became a distribution center. Food stores, free herbcraft, teaching circles. The care Ilara had pioneered in secret was now institutional, public, permanent. Neighbors who had once hidden from each other now gathered in her small room, sharing meals, sharing stories, sharing futures. On the spring equinox, the realm gathered at the Howl Crown. Ilara stood at the center of the circle, where Kyle would have stood. The stones hummed beneath her feet, not with cold, but with warmth, with beginning. The sky was blue, impossibly blue, and the air smelled of snowmelt and new growth. She spoke, and her voice carried without effort. We are building something that has never existed in this realm. Not an order where some rule and others serve, but a covenant where the powerful guard the weak not from above, but beside them. This is not the end of power. It is the transformation of it. We live or die by whether we choose to protect what matters more than winning. Jonas stood at her shoulder. No longer sick, no longer afraid. Carrying their mother's dried herbs, their father's stubborn belief that some things were worth fighting for. Sabila stood as witness, the old seer whose prophecy had been fulfilled in exactly the way she could not have predicted but always hoped was possible. Where Kyle would have stood, there was a stone, placed by his own final command, inscribed with words. He chose to die so that love could rule. That is the truest power. The realm watched, and the watching began to become belief. Spring deepened, winter became a memory, and the silver mane, no longer a legend or a curse, became the new story that mothers told daughters. Not a story of domination, but of a girl who chose mercy when she could have chosen vengeance, and remade the world by daring to love something bigger than herself.